Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my channel's weekly compendium for the week ending November 22nd, 2021. Case file number 394, written by Mr. Shanane 98. It's one thing for a small object to disappear, but an entire truck? Well, two strange things happen that we can't explain. My buddy and I took a day trip to pick up a motorcycle yesterday, and, for the most part, everything was completely normal, aside from insanely stupid drivers, but that's the city for you. The whole trip took about 10 hours, as we live in a small town that's pretty far away from the city we had to go to. On our way back, we were on a pretty empty stretch of highway. The only other vehicle was a blue Tundra SR5, going the same direction as us that he decided to pass. Here's where the strange things start to happen. A few minutes before we passed the Tundra, I noticed a decent-sized chip in the windshield of my buddy's truck, which was weird because we hadn't seen it the entire trip and didn't notice anything hitting his windshield that would have caused it, but whatever, it happens. We passed the truck, and not 10 seconds after, he turned to me and said, "Where the hell did that blue Tundra go?" I asked him if he was talking about the one we had just passed, and all he said was, "So you saw it too, right?" I turned around, and there was nothing behind us but an empty highway. Mind you, this is in Texas on a flat stretch of highway. There were no exits, turnoffs, or turnarounds where we were, and even if there were, the truck was going about 70, so they wouldn't have been able to stop fast enough to turn. If they did manage that, we still would have seen it. The last weird part happened today. I went over to my buddy's house to help move some stuff around. He went to his truck and, after a little bit, called me over to take a look at his windshield. There was no chip in it whatsoever. We searched for it for probably 10 minutes, but there was nothing, just smooth glass. Even though it's mundane compared to some stories here, we're both completely dumbfounded by what all happened. We know we saw the Tundra. We know there was a chip in his windshield, but both vanished with no explanation. Case notes. File number 394. So I'm thinking here that this wasn't quantum immortality, a crossover. I'm thinking it's more likely that you perceived with your friend this other universe, but you're not occupying it. I gather this because you didn't mention anything else being off in your existing universe. The crack in the windshield, as well as the truck disappearing, suggests that you were perceiving this other universe while driving, but then switched back into your normal one. There wasn't anything that would really cause you or your friend to die. Passing a truck I don't think would be so dangerous as to cause that. It's not impossible. Quantum immortality is always a possible explanation when things get odd. But my gut says here that it was just a perception thing. I'd really love to know what causes it. Clearly it's not just individual if that's what happened here. It's not just like an individual sense because your friend perceived the same thing. So you had a witness, which would indicate some sort of environmental factor, as well as timing. You have to be in a certain place in a certain time. I wonder if ley lines have anything to do with it. Case file number 395, written by Nanaroni, a glitch that would make a mother happy. I went to see John Mulaney tonight. It was awesome. When the tickets were about to come out, my friend alerted me so we could buy tickets together the second they went on sale. It was just going to be me and my two friends and my sister. Right before they went on sale, I told my friend, "Get 4 in a row, I'll pay you back." So she did. But then, right after we bought it, I told my mom, and my mom said, "Wait, I want to go too. Buy me a ticket." I went to go do it, but since they were a hot commodity, the seats on our row and directly behind us had all been snatched up. The closest thing I could get to us was a single-seat caddy corner, aka the row behind us and one seat to the right. I went ahead and bought the seat because I figured my mom wouldn't mind too much being the odd one out. My friends looked at my screen a couple of times while I was doing this, and I lamented to them about how the tickets were going fast and I had just bought one in a different row. So the show was today. I spent some time at dinner a little anxious because I hadn't told my mom she wasn't technically sitting with us, and I was banking on her being cool with it, but planning to switch with her if I had to. I told her about it and she was cool with it. Phew. We get in line and distribute the physical tickets we printed. The friend holding them says, "Take the odd one out and give it to your mom." I look through them and see all the seats right next to each other. Section 3F, 1 through 5. I'm like, "Did you look at these? They're all in the same row." She says, "Yeah, I looked. Here." Then goes to show me which one is on a different row. Then she's confused because she sees the same thing I do, 5 consecutive seats in the same row. We're all baffled because we all remember them not being together. We were baffled all the way from being in line to being in our assigned seats and seeing, yep, what the hell, we're all sitting together. I can literally picture the seat map and exactly where the odd seat should have been. The only thing I can think is they changed the ticket, but there would be no reason to do that because we put them under separate names. So why would they just switch some rando a row up? My digital ticket now says the seat number that was on the printed ticket. Well, thanks glitch gods. I'm glad nobody had to sit alone. Not the worst glitch in the universe. Case file number 396, written by Princess Dead. A photograph with a will of its own. Last summer, I went on a road trip to Mostar, Bosnia, and Herzegovina with my boyfriend. One night we had dinner in a traditional Bosnian restaurant, and we got a photograph of the staff posing and dressing up in traditional Bosnian clothes as a gift. I guess the other guests got this gift too. I took the photo with me and brought it home because I wanted to keep it as a memory of our trip. When I got home, I put the photo in a drawer in my bedroom's desk, and that's it. Fast forward 3 to 4 months. I was getting ready for something, walked in my room, and saw this restaurant picture sitting on my desk vertically. It wasn't just sitting there randomly. It was leaning against some object that I had on my desk, so it was on full display. Literally, like I wanted it to be seen and exhibited there for everyone else to see. I hope I explained myself well here. Of course, I was confused, but thought that maybe my mom was looking for something in my drawer and put the photo up there. I asked her, and she was like, "What the hell? No." And said that she saw the picture and wanted to ask me why I displayed a random restaurant photo on my desk for no reason. We both thought it was weird, but dismissed it, because we thought that one of us must have done it unknowingly. And it's just the two of us living in the house. Nobody else had access to my room at that moment. Put the photo back in the drawer and continued living life. That happened a few weeks ago. But now I am absolutely creeped out. Literally an hour ago, I was just sitting in my room, chilling and watching a movie. I hear something fell on the floor near the desk. I went to see what it was, and there is this damn restaurant photo just laying there. It was in the drawer, and it somehow fell from who knows where and landed on my floor. Where did it come from? It wasn't even near my desk. I was across the room on my bed. What the hell is happening? Is that damn picture haunted, or am I in the Matrix? Case file number 397, written by Slime Puppy 17. The Ghost Fly. About 5 years ago, I lived in an interesting house, to say the least. No locks on any bedroom doors, and our light bulbs would go missing from ceiling fixtures. But that is a story for another day. Anyway, during the summer that year, we were having a serious issue with flies getting into the house to the point where we had fly traps hanging everywhere around the house. Needless to say, I got great at stalking and killing them. Well, anyway, I was sitting on the couch and saw a fly, so I followed it around the house using my newly honed stealth skills, determination, and my designated smashing shoe, ready to kill that pest as soon as it landed. It finally landed on the wall next to the couch, so I sat down on the other end of the couch and slowly crept up right next to it so it wouldn't notice me. I had my eyes focused on this little bastard, weapon in hand, and ready to go, and as soon as I was about to go in for the kill, it just phased into the wall. It completely disappeared in front of my eyes. So obviously, I started freaking out, yelling for my roommates to help me look for it, thinking that maybe it just fell. But to no avail, it was nowhere to be seen. Unfortunately, I was the only one to see it happen, so of course no one believed me, but I know exactly what I saw. To this day, I still have no explanation of how this fly disappeared right into the wall. So either it was some ghost fly I had already killed that had come back to mess with me, or my living room walls were a portal to a safe haven for flies. Bonus file, written by Wander On 74661. A mother's desire to protect her son is eternal. When I was 27, my mom and I got into a car accident. I remember the moment of impact, and then dreaming of my mom walking away from me. I ran to catch up with her, and she turned and said, "No, don't follow me. then kept walking. After a moment's pause, I started to follow again, and she turned around again and said, "Ian, don't follow me. Your daughter needs you." I was confused because I had no children, and I asked her what she meant, but she just continued to walk away. I wanted to follow her. I felt like I was being pulled towards her, but I stayed where I was. My next memory is of waking up in the hospital. Apparently, I'd been seriously injured. My heart had stopped in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, and no one knew if I was going to pull through for several days. I asked if my mom was okay, and was told she'd died almost instantly upon impact. I chose not to tell anyone about my dream, but I did have a nagging feeling about what my mom had said about my daughter, so I asked my girlfriend, now my wife, to take a pregnancy test, which was positive. My daughter is 6 years old now. Her middle name is my mom's name. Since she was a baby, it seemed like she was seeing someone who wasn't there. She would look over my shoulder and her eyes would fixate on something. She'd react as if someone was interacting with her, reaching out to them, smiling or giggling at them, crawling towards them. We thought it was normal baby stuff until our son came along and didn't do anything like that. She learned the word Nana, despite none of us remembering teaching it to her, as my wife's mom is grandma, not Nana. Recently, I was going through a family photo album my dad had given me to scan the photos, and she pointed to a photo of my mom and said, "That's Nana." I started telling her about my mom and mentioned she'd never met her, but my daughter disagreed. She said she's talked to her Nana, but couldn't remember when. She did remember that her Nana told her a funny story about how I fell into a river when I was 9, and recounted it in the same way my mom used to tell the story. I know all of these can somewhat be explained away rationally. Brains can do some wacky things during traumatic experiences and after head injuries. It's possible I'd subconsciously noticed my wife's pregnancy symptoms, and that came out in my dream. Kids also do have vivid imaginations. Maybe someone told my daughter the story and forgot about it. But I like to think my mom really did save me from dying that day and is watching over us. I like to think that at least my daughter didn't miss out on meeting my mom. It's comforting, feeling like maybe she's still out there. Case file number 398, written by Nafiso. Legs running, only they have no bodies attached to them. I want to share a story that is 100% real, for me at least. I'm a registered nurse at the local hospital, which has 2 separate buildings. I finished my shift at 10 at night, and this particular building was closing. It's not the main building. The lights went out, but not completely, because at the 3rd floor was a kidney dialysis unit. I was waiting for my coworker from the 3rd floor in the car with another coworker. I was at the main level. The glass door and the windows were behind me, and I could see them clearly from my mirror. There were little offices divided with thin drywall, and between the 2 sections of them was a door. All of the walls at that level had big glass windows from top to bottom. All of a sudden, I saw legs running, just legs, a lot of legs, wearing scrubs and running through space separators behind the glass doors. Of course, I turned around and then got out of the car. I was still watching them running. They didn't have a body. I was just shocked. I asked my friend if she saw it, and she didn't. I kept watching them running and disappearing. I felt like my head was going to explode. There was no way I was that crazy. It was real. The building I was working at was not for emergency incidents, therefore there was no reason for the staff to be running so quickly, even if it was real and not my imagination. 10 years later, my mother got sick and was hospitalized at the main building. She died from a heart attack. The nurses there were running to get to her, and I remembered what I saw that night. I'd like to know others' opinions on that. I can't tell it to anyone else because they say the same thing. It was my imagination. I was tired, etc. But I was not tired. In fact, I was lucky enough to be working at that part of the hospital where the pace was completely smooth and calm. To this day, it is still real. Very real. Case file number 399, written by Reddit user, The One True Ring That Will Not Leave. When I was a teenager, I got a set of inexpensive stacking rings from a high street shop. They were 3 geometrically shaped rings, a square, a circle, and a lozenge shape. I liked the lozenge the best, so I wore it all the time to school and to other things. I was on a short trip away about a year after buying this, and of course, I brought it with me as it was still my favorite piece of jewelry at the time. I was in a department store and went to the bathroom, taking off my ring to wash my hands and leaving it by the sink. Big mistake. I forgot about the ring and only realized I had lost it by that evening. I knew it would be long gone, and there was no point in even looking for it because it was in the bathroom of a major department store on a famous tourist street in the city I was visiting. And then, bizarrely, a couple weeks later, once I was back home, I put my hand in the pocket of my coat, and there it was. I hadn't even been wearing that coat that day, and I obviously checked my pockets and bag when I realized it wasn't on my finger that day anyway. Since then, that specific ring has done a disappearing act a few more times, always showing up again in my house. One time I lost it and genuinely had no idea where it was at all until it turned up literally on my jewelry dish on my desk. Now I just keep it in a box for safekeeping. I can't ever give it away, it'll probably just come back to me anyway. Case notes, file number 399. So this is a cool glitch, and at least to my devious mind, I'm thinking, oh, here's an opportunity for infinite money. And say you post an ad for it on Craigslist, you sell it for, $500 or something, and then after a few weeks, it just comes right back to you, and you do it all over again. Ooh, pure evil. Case file number 400, written by Rushnav, when an entire book section goes missing. This happened a couple days ago, and still kind of weirded out by it. So I go to local thrift stores at least once a week or so to look for new reading material, and getting a good deal on them is always a plus since I read so much. I've gone to this specific store for around a year or so, and while they never had a great selection, I picked up around 7 books in total. I went there a few days ago to peruse, and to my disappointment, the book section was completely gone and replaced by a clothing section. I was sad, of course, since this location is a stone's throw away, but I get that paper books aren't as popular anymore and probably don't run a huge profit with low volume. There was an associate nearby stocking the shelves, and I asked him about the books. Their response? We've never had a book section at this location. I thought that was an odd response since I know I purchased books there before, but I didn't recognize that worker, so I thought they must just be new. After that, I found a few items that I liked and went to the register. While I was checking out, I asked the cashier about the book section and got basically the same response. I don't remember having a book section here. You must be thinking of somewhere else. I then asked how long they worked there. They've been working there for 3 years. I have gone there in the past year and I know I bought books, so logically I was flabbergasted. Brushed it then, checked out, and left. After this, I checked on Google for that store, and none of the customer pictures have a book section in them. Pictures from the thrift store itself show the outside and the main entrance. The books were usually kept in the far corner, and from what I can tell in their pixelated pictures, it does not seem like the taller bookshelves were there, but not 100% sure on it. I don't keep any receipts for small stuff like this, but I still have those books, and I specifically remember being in that store buying those books, which is why I'm still confused about it. Case file number 401, written by Urex. My phone teleported across the room, and my sister saw it too. I was living at home a few years back. My mother's house is one of those miniature, lower middle class houses where all the rooms are tiny, so there isn't a lot of room in my bedroom. If 2 people are in my room at the same time, you have to move around them. I'm standing at one end of the room on my phone when my sister walked in and started talking to me about something. So I sat my phone down on the glass top vanity, little table with a mirror for makeup and stuff, with the distinctive clack of a phone against thick glass, and I stood there talking to my sister for a minute or so. When the conversation is over and she's about to turn around and leave, I reach for my phone, but it isn't there. Confusion. Still standing in the same spot, I glance around the room and spot my phone lying on the dresser by my sister, on the opposite side of the room, right next to her. My mind was 100% ready to write this off, to think, oh, that's weird, and move along with my day. But then I noticed a look of abject horror on my sister's face. You set your phone down on the vanity. She was right. I had set it down on the vanity when she walked in. I heard the clack. I hadn't moved. It would have been pretty awkward in my small room for me to have maneuvered around my bed and my sister to place the phone on the dresser next to her. It made no sense. But it got me thinking, how often do I write off experiences like this because no one else is around? I was so ready to just not think about it. We still talk about this. Bonus file, written by Adhara, 27. Genuine guardian angels or just friendly passerbys? Let me preface this by saying this story is completely true. I did not experience it myself, but my mother is very much a I have to see it to believe it type, and while religious, is still quite realistic. Some years ago, I lived in Savannah with my dad and stepmom, whom I'll be calling V for this story. V's mother, my step-grandmother, was sick at the time and lived in central Georgia. Each Friday, V and I would drive from Savannah to her home to take care of her for the weekend, clean the house, etc. We'd drive home Sunday nights and be back in Savannah by about 11. At the time, I was working a part-time retail schedule, so I didn't always have weekends off. In 2015, on one weekend when I could not go, V called me Sunday night, sounding worried. Her tire had rapidly lost air on the way back. We later found out that her father had worked on their car over the weekend and neglected to completely screw the cap back on. Her tire was now flat, and the Georgia backroads are rarely maintained and are often little more than barely held together piles of gravel. Driving them with a flat tire is extremely dangerous. I asked her location and offered to drive out and meet her. She agreed. I hung up and headed out to meet her somewhere near Dublin. A little under an hour later, she called me back, immediately starting with, "You're not gonna believe what happened." In her own words, a short time after our call ended, a truck pulled onto the road from out of nowhere and came up behind her. Out got two young men. She was frightened and put down the window barely an inch to talk to them. They asked if she needed help and she said yes, one of her tires was flat. They offered to escort her to a nearby, somewhat hidden gas station to air up her tire. She agreed, but made sure to keep a knife within reach in case things went south. As promised, they led her to a gas station off of some little dirt road. According to her, the place didn't even look like it was open, but it was brightly lit, and there was a working air pump. She got out to fill her tire, and, as most pumps were until recently, it was cash only. Well, coin only. She had none. Then one of the men told her to check the coin return. She did and found 6 quarters, exactly enough to air up her tire. They told her not to worry, and went to work airing up and checking all of the tires. Although she tried to offer a monetary reward next time she came through, they refused. They told her that they often did this, and all they wanted to do was help. The only thing they wanted in return was for her to attend church the next week and to pass on kindness to someone else. She said that as they got into the truck, she could almost see a faint golden glow about them. She never saw them on that road again. To this day, she is totally convinced that she met a pair of angels. I don't know what she met, but I'm very, very happy that they were benign. Case file number 402, written by Biscuit Burrier 94. Honey, we need a Swiffer. But I repeat myself. Rewind about 30 minutes ago, and my girlfriend and I are sitting down, making a list of errands we need to run, and things to get. The list comes out to be 8 things. Some things on the list were exchange diapers, my son is growing rapidly, and return cans. So I'm making my trips from our apartment to the car, getting the car organized so the whole family can go, as well as the diapers and cans. This takes about 10 minutes or so. After this, I come back into the apartment and I'm standing by the front door fiddling with my son's car seat while talking to my girlfriend about something that happened this morning. After this conversation, she asked me if I got the last bag of cans from the can container by the front door. I said I had forgotten, and that was a good call. This is where it happens. As I finish fiddling with the car seat, I turn and walk to the container to remove the cans, maybe about 3 to 4 steps away. While walking with my back turned, my girlfriend says matter-of-factly, "We need a Swiffer." I pull out my phone and add Swiffer to my list without ever looking back at my girlfriend. I proceed to pull out the bag of cans from the container, tie the bag up, and look up at her when I'm finished looping, swooping, and pulling. She then looks at me and says, "You know what else we need to add to the list? A Swiffer." I just look at her, kind of annoyed, and I'm like, "Yeah, I know, you just said that." And to which she responds, "No, I didn't." We then butt heads for about 3 minutes about her saying we need a Swiffer twice in about 15 seconds because we are both, admittedly, stubborn people. Then it hit me. I added Swiffer to my list between the first Swiffer I heard with my back turned to her and the second Swiffer when I had actually been facing my girlfriend, watching her lips move and producing sound. So I heard my girlfriend say, "We need a Swiffer," and then 10 to 15 seconds later, "You know what else we need to add to the list? A Swiffer." She swears up and down she never said, "We need a Swiffer," out loud. I don't know what happened or how I heard her, but you can bet your ass we're getting a Swiffer. Last thing to add, I explained to her last night what a glitch in the Matrix was. I was on the sub for half an hour reading top stories of the year, and we read a couple of them together. The timing of this is, well, comedic. Case file number 403, written by Little Miss Raindrop. Goodbye, and thanks for all the fish. When I was in high school, I used to have a pretty decently sized fish tank in my bedroom, filled with randoms, a flounder, and 2 of those big black, eyes-popping-out goldfish. I live right on the coast, and hurricanes are a big issue for us. This particular season, we evacuated as Hurricane Ike flooded my hometown, and we couldn't get back for weeks. A close friend of mine and I went into my room to survey the fish tank and see if anything was still living in there. After Ike, they had no power, horribly dirty, barely any water. All of them were dead except for Popeye, one of the black goldfish that only had one eyeball to begin with. He was like thriving weirdly. Fast forward a couple of months and the same friend is over and she's gonna help me clean out the Popeye tank. We put Popeye into a big fishbowl on the counter and cleaned the tank out in the bathtub. We couldn't have been turned around for more than 5 minutes before glancing back and seeing that Popeye has freaking vanished. Not on the floor, not on the counter. I mean literally, the fish just all of a sudden remembered it was supposed to have died during the hurricane, so he noped out of being my fish. To make things even weirder, our freshman year of college, this friend and I had to go to mandatory fish camp. Our counselor made a confession to us about how she secretly thought goldfish were terrifying because she had one disappear out of its bowl too. Case notes, file number 403. I just want to quickly say here, the fact you had a witness means this couldn't be the typical type of thing like quantum immortality, you just switch to another universe. No, it does seem like this is actually a disappearing object phenomenon, where this does happen to organic matter too. There are whole humans who just disappear for minutes, sometimes even months. They do come back though, typically. So if you wait long enough, maybe Popeye will just pop back in one day. I would keep the bowl if I were you. Case file number 404, written by Nomadic Memories. When you call your friend and talk to him, he gives you info, and yet he doesn't have a phone anymore. This took place back in 2002. I was about 18 years old at the time. I had spent a few months out of state, staying with my sister, when I decided to head back home to see my best friend, Tony. Once I got into town, I gave him a call from a payphone. We spoke for about 20 minutes, and he was telling me how he left his wife, has a new place, and was seeing someone else. I told him I needed a couch, so I could visit for a few days, and he gave me his new address, followed by, "I'll be at a friend's house for a bit, but you can come over there too. They live at X address, just look for the red Mazda." We hung up and I walked across town, maybe an hour, to his friend's house. Once I got there, I found a lot of red cars, but not that specific address. I was still looking at each to figure out which one was the Mazda, but stopped when I heard a very distinct laugh. Me, shouting, "There's only one person I know with a laugh like that. Sup, chicken legs?" Tony had a girl standing beside him, and I walked over to greet them. Me, "Hi Becky, I'm Nomad." To Tony, dude, I still don't see the Mazda I'm supposed to find." "What Mazda? And how do you know her name?" "And oh, I broke up with Andy. I'm dating Becky now." "I know, you already told me that, and the Mazda you told me to look for." "What? When?" "On the phone, dude, literally less than 2 hours ago." I don't have a phone. It was shut off a few weeks ago when Andy and I broke up." "Huh? No, I just spoke to you. You live in a trailer by the bowling alley now, right? You left Andy because she slept with Mark. You met Becky at a party. you have a new job hanging chickens. He told me to come here to find you. Dude, I spoke with you. I know your voice. You even told me I could crash on your couch. Yeah, that's all true, and of course you can crash. But I didn't talk to you on the phone. That wasn't me. Becky, Tony, you know how you were passed out on the floor and talking in your sleep last night? I think you were talking to him. It turns out that Tony got really drunk and passed out face down on the kitchen floor. Becky had to drag him to the bedroom the whole while he was talking to someone. One guess what all he was talking about. I never found the Mazda. Rest in peace, Tony. 1982 to 2004. I still hear that laugh. Bonus file, written by Monroe 340. When you're taking a nap and a big black dog licks your face, but you don't own a dog. My mom hasn't talked about this experience for quite some time, but recently she mentioned it in a bit more detail. For some background info, we've lived in our house for maybe 20 years now. It's pretty old, and a few of my uncles plus other relatives have lived here. Some of them claim that our house was haunted. That's a story for another day. Anyway, I wasn't born yet, so sorry if this next part's brief. As I mentioned before, I still don't know all the details. My mom worked a night shift, so she'd be home alone throughout the day mostly. She said this started one day when she was cleaning. She suddenly heard someone call out her name from the direction of our backyard. She glanced out the window but didn't see anyone. She then heard someone call out again, this time from the front yard. She decided not to look out a window this time because she now understood that whatever was out there wasn't good. Mom's not real religious, but she learned from her grandfather to always trust in God. So she began to recite a short prayer. Then she heard the voice again, this time as she showered. She said she felt afraid and noticed that it sounded like a woman's voice. She began to pray again. This next one's the scariest of her experiences, in my opinion. She was lying in bed one afternoon, but she couldn't sleep. She had her eyes closed. Then, suddenly, she felt like something was looming over her. She ignored the feeling and tried to go back to her nap. Then, suddenly, she felt a warm tongue lick all of her cheek. Obviously, at that moment, she was terrified. She opened her eyes and saw a black dog about the height of the bed, standing there and panting. She closed her eyes, cried, and again began to ask God for help. I'm not sure, but I think she said that eventually she didn't feel the dog there anymore, but she still kept crying. Again, my mom has no trouble talking about this, as she always trusted in God, but I don't know all the details to her story. Once I get a chance to ask her more, I'll gladly fill this in. Case file number 405, written by OMC 1596. The glitchiest mac and cheese you've ever had. I consider myself a huge skeptic. I don't even like reading about paranormal stuff because it all just sounds like, well, made up to me. I do like Glitch in the Matrix stories though, because it's mostly just normal days with one weird ass thing happening with no explanation. However, I never thought I'd actually have something to post here, myself. A few nights ago, I was riding the bus to work, reading a memoir of a woman growing up with bipolar disorder. I get to this page where the author is describing a cringy poem she had written in high school to a guy named Mac. The second line was, "Your first syllable is my favorite food." The second I finished that line, a lady in the back of the bus said, "Mac and cheese." She hadn't been talking to anyone the entire time before. I would have noticed. I can't focus when reading if people are talking. I was sitting in the middle of the bus and I used a paper white Kindle, no backlight. There's no way she could have read my page. She did continue talking the rest of the bus ride after that though, to the person next to her. My mind was, and still is, blown. Side story. A guy got on the bus after that trippiness and kept fist bumping me and saying, "Respect, respect," over and over, pointing at my mask. He tried to give me $2 a few times, but I think this one can be explained by drugs, probably. Case file number 406, written by Sad Boy with PTSD. Friend vanishes for a few minutes, and I mean like she never even existed. After being confused for a while, I'm still not convinced that I was dreaming. I have come to terms with the fact that my best friend disappeared for a couple of minutes today in the morning. Yesterday night, I remember preparing notes for my best friend from which I was supposed to ask her questions to help her prepare for her accountancy test this morning. We finished up the work by 12, wrapped up for the night after talking for a little, and then went off to sleep around an hour later. I was supposed to call her at 6 in the morning to make sure that she was up and going for her practicals. As planned, my alarm rang at 6, and after snoozing it twice, I realized that I had already overslept 20 minutes, and I sprang up in panic. I checked my phone for time, and it was still 6. I assumed that I had a weird dream where I was snoozing, and I was in fact just on time. After recollecting myself, I was all set to call her, but while scrolling through my contacts, I could not find her. I scrolled the second time, and then really rubbed my eyes trying to get rid of the early morning fatigue I was feeling. I opened my eyes wide and searched once again, a little slowly, and nothing. I could not find her. I then switched applications and tried connecting to her on WhatsApp, but still nothing. At this point, I assumed I somehow lost her number and deleted her WhatsApp too, so I went to Instagram to reach her, and the username just didn't exist. All her schedules, pictures, documents were missing from my phone along with her email ID. It felt as if she just didn't exist and never did. Just as I was panicking about not being able to find her, I tried doing several things like messing with the internet and reinstalling applications that didn't work either. After finally giving up and switching off my phone, I found her on Instagram through my laptop. I panickingly switched the phone back on and unexpectedly found her contact back up on WhatsApp. I rang her up to ask her what the hell just happened, only to get yelled at for waking her up this early. I also asked her about practicals after explaining everything to her, and she said she had no such tests coming up. This is messing me up, and we both have no clue as to what happened with me this morning. I still have the notes I prepared with her, but she has no memory of studying this chapter with me recently. Her next upcoming test is psychology, and apparently, she has been studying for it for a week now. I can swear that the accountancy practical was definitely going to be held this very day, and now I feel completely clueless with no explanation. Does anyone have an explanation for this? Case notes, file number 406. You know what could have possibly happened? You had a crossover event. You went to a universe where she wasn't even your friend. This lasted for a couple minutes, and then you switched back to your original universe, but your friend didn't come back. Now, the thing with this is, it would be dependent on if she actually does have the practical exam, she just doesn't remember it. So if you can, you need to confirm with the school to make sure that she didn't actually have the exam. If it was just her memory faulty, then this would fit. If it wasn't, then you actually are finding yourself in a new universe. It's weird because you have the paper. You have the paper with you that you worked on. Unless you physically were holding that as you crossed over, it shouldn't have come with you. Now, if you were holding it, I guess that would make sense. And the other thing is, the crossovers are seamless. You never really know when it's happening. So you couldn't really pinpoint, unless you were noticing a shift in something that changed in your visual periphery, but that's very unlikely, because usually the universes you go to are almost identical, with tiny changes, or sometimes medium changes, like not having the same friend. So yeah, it does seem to be like some sort of server transfer going on, a hiccup in it, where you and your friend both experienced it, but not at the same time in perfect sync. Bonus file, written by Gypsy Soul. When my gut feels hinky out in the woods, I trust it. As I'm sure some of you are aware, the hunting season for white-tailed deer is about to start this weekend. I've, 25 female, been spending a decent chunk of time in the stand with my partner, in life and in most ventures generally. Because we've discovered that hogs have been rooting up the oats and generally causing havoc and scaring away the deer from the feeder. We've gone out a handful of times in the last 2 weeks, attempting to catch the miscreants at it. So far, no luck. Very frustrating. At any rate, because of the hogs, I've been spending more time in a stand after dark than I ever have in my life. We've been up there from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m., 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., 9 p.m. to 11 p.m., and every other weird time slot you can think of. I mention this just in case it's relevant or helps paint a picture. There have been a few things that have happened that I've struggled to explain away or rationalize, and my partner is out of ideas too. The first thing happened about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. It was around 1 or 2 in the morning, with a decent chunk of moon illuminating the area. I was only half paying attention to my surroundings, because I'd already written the night off as a bust, when all of a sudden, I became aware of a weird whirring/flapping sound. I thought it originated from something behind me, but my partner said he heard it coming from away and to the front or left of us. At any rate, it was loud, airborne, and passed quickly over us and away. I'm very familiar with the sound drones make, and this wasn't it. It also wasn't a helicopter. The sound was too small, if that makes sense. And it wasn't a bird, it sounded too mechanical. It was flying very low, probably just above the tree line. We couldn't see anything. The second thing happened about a week ago. We weren't in the stand, but it was weird and out of the norm, so I'll mention it. We live on the same property that the stand is on. It was around 9 or 10 at night, when all of a sudden there was a distant boom, like an explosion, which hit our home like a thud. If you've ever spent any time around heavy artillery or explosives, you'll know what I mean. It was strong enough that my sister-in-law, who lives down the road, called us asking what the hell had just happened. It could have been a natural gas explosion, but the weird part is that my partner did some internet digging, and a local emergency management website had posted asking for any info on an unknown explosion back in 2016, during the same time of year. We still have no clue what it was, and apparently the authorities didn't either. And then lastly, tonight, we were out in the stand once again. It's gotten cold and we've had a ton of rain all day, so everything was damp and dripping. We went out at 10 at night and it was about 10:30. I was preoccupied with trying to keep my fingers and toes warm when suddenly I became aware of a weird murmuring. My partner heard it too, but he has hearing damage, so I don't think he heard the full breadth of the tones. To me, it kinda sounded like muffled voices off in the distance, like several someones having a conversation too far off to make out the individual words. But the direction the sounds were coming from doesn't have any buildings or dwellings, it's just woods, and there were several different tones. My partner said it kind of sounded like a cow moaning, but not quite. There are cattle in the area, and we hear them vocalizing all the time. This wasn't that. There isn't any grazing land in the vicinity of the sound's origins. They carried on for maybe 30 seconds, slightly rose in a crescendo, and then died off and faded away completely. I want to stress how indistinct these sounds were. If I hadn't been listening intently, I don't know if I would have heard that. All of this, coupled with the general gut feeling I have whenever I'm out in the dark alone, has me wondering. I don't necessarily feel endangered, just generally watched and noticed. I have very good instincts and I try to listen to them. I'd love to know what y'all think. There may be rational explanations for all these phenomena. All I know is, I don't want to be another hunter with another creepy story, but I feel like I'm starting to see a bell curve emerge. Edit. I'd like to add that I'm not a noob or babe in the woods. I spent most of my life outside. I grew up camping and hiking during almost all times of the year. Sleeping on the ground in a tent, you get used to hearing nature moving around at night. I spent 6 years active duty in the military, so I've been exposed to some military-grade technology and what that might look and sound like. Obviously, there's top-secret crap hardly anyone sees, but still. I have also worked during all hours of the day and night, always outside. This is the first time in my life, aside from a one-off experience I had at camp growing up, that anything out of the ordinary has happened when I've been outside to hear it. In fact, I've always joked that I must be some kind of deterrent to paranormal activity, because nothing ever happens when I'm around. More than likely, there are rational, ordinary explanations for the sounds we've heard. But I also trust my gut, and if something feels hinky, it usually is.